Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the J&J Pod, featuring a conversation between John Laxmi and John Laxmi. This episode focuses on loneliness.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the J&J Pod. I am John, or Jonathan, and that's my father, John. So this is an intergenerational podcast and also a family pod. Now in today's episode, we are covering a very timely and universal concept, loneliness, right? And this is somewhat of a, it's probably embarrassing to say, but somewhat of a specialty of mine, not only from personal experience, but what I focus on now. So I'm the founder of Kismet. And Kismet is a company and really a mission that focuses on solving this issue, right? Social isolation, loneliness, and the pain of broken relationships. And I solve for that using what I like to call the science of connection and the lost art of love, right? The art of connecting with people, caring about it, prioritizing it. And there's a large layer of biometric data, science, and statistics that can help us optimize relationships. Before this, I had worked for the CIA's venture arm, investing in technologies not so dissimilar to this space in human behavior, human performance, etc. Before that, I had done stints in several different places, right? NASA, JP Morgan, the White House, artificial intelligence startups, you name it. And a lot of that was probably driven through loneliness as well, right? Looking for purpose. You all can probably relate to that. So today we will be focusing on something that's very close to home and a specific, almost pet project of mine to solve it in my own life. But I will pass it on to my father and he can introduce himself.
Hi, Jonathan. Thank you. Hello, everyone, again. Last episode, we did the first episode in our series. We covered Silicon Valley Bank, the big problem in our economy. This week, we're going to really deal with a more important issue. I'm Jonathan's dad. I live in Atlanta. I'm retired now after a long career in government and finance. I lived in West Virginia for about 6 years and then in the New York area for about 25 plus years. I now live in Atlanta and I'm hearing about loneliness here too. Big city, like New York, and everywhere we look, this seems to be a very important issue that's affecting a lot of people. And I think that this is something that we really should delve into. And one of the things that really strikes me as a conundrum is today we are living in one of the most technologically advanced status where we can connect with everybody in the world. We can connect with people in Antarctica. We've got phones and WhatsApp and all types of technology that's connecting us. And yet we are feeling lonely. It's not like 30 years ago, a generation ago, we had to travel to different places to meet people. We had to make calls that were expensive. We had to make international calls that were just unaffordable. But now, relatively speaking, today we are saying we are lonely. How did we get this way? That's really one of the things I'd like to ask Jonathan. You, especially your generation, is connected to this technology a lot more than my generation, and you've got this kismet of company that you're trying to run to try to address it. So how did we end up here?
Yeah. So, I mean, to answer that question of how we ended up here, I think probably is less important than just accepting the fact that we are here, right? So this is an issue that I think I've witnessed very directly with my generation as a millennial, but also generations below me, right? We can list off, I mean, there's a million statistics, right? Gen Z has the highest antidepressant use. They're having the least amount of sex. They're having the most amount of platonic friendships, but feeling the loneliest, right? The opioid crisis, all of this is being driven by people not having strong relationships. Now, when you look at this chart, for example, right, I had put this together. You can go to my website, kismet.com. I put together a deck that covers potential solutions in this space, maybe more focused on the deepest relationship, right? Romantic love. But what this shows is that there is a poison that compounds, right? We feel this social isolation. We feel lonely. Like my father said, we're all connected, right? You can get on your phone right now. I mean, you're listening to this probably on your phone. You can connect with 1 million people. And I've been to Antarctica, right? I went on an icebreaker ship and I probably felt more connected to my shipmates than I do sitting in this relatively expensive apartment in West Village in New York, right? So you feel isolated. You go online because where are you going to be if you're not where the action is, right? You can't live in this world without being online. So we can't do the whole thing of curb usage of technology, right? People are going to be on technology. You experience either harassment, negative news, you're witnessing violence in the news, you're seeing negative news, right? Bad news is good news, or bad news makes news. And what does that cause? That, with the reinforcement of mass media, COVID isolating us further, inflation hitting us where it hurts, that's going to result in the very issues that then reinforce our isolation further, right? When you feel that kind of pain, think about your relationships. I'm sure all of you have fought with your spouse, your partners, your friends, coworkers, right? When you sit there and you feel isolated and misunderstood, what does that cause? Classically, some people turn down and maybe they'll cry, but a lot of times you get frustrated, right? May not be something crazy like road rage, but you can get upset. You can act not in your best self. And what does that do? That estranges you further, right? Makes you feel more misunderstood. And it's a negative vice cycle, which only perpetuates the problem. So it is something that is very near and dear to me because I am lonely, right? I consider myself a relatively smart, handsome, accomplished man. And I saw this so closely and so firsthand. I was in DC to work for the CIA's investment arm, and I knew no one in that city. And I'm a deep extrovert, right? I can go to the club by myself with no alcohol and talk to people there. But I went on chat roulette to talk to a lot of these people in Gen Z and to see what they're up to. And a lot of these people, they're on their phone all the time, like I have to be now for my company, on TikTok. But they have no one to pick them up to take them to the airport. They have no one to ask them how they're feeling, why they're upset. There's a lack of the ability to be vulnerable. So we can talk about the mental health dialogue. We can brag about going to therapy as if it's a cool thing, but how many people do you truly feel understand you? So this is something I want to turn to you, Dad, and say, how have you witnessed, right, the older generations experiencing loneliness? Because 25% of women age 60 and up are on antidepressants, right? Is it a silent problem? Is this a silent struggle? How are people coping?
Well, that's an interesting question. The older generation, one would think, most of us are married and have children and settled down, and one would think that we should be less lonely. But very curiously, what I'm finding all around me, among people of my age and generation, a different kind of loneliness. One part of it is our generation, the baby boom generation that I belong to, feel to some extent that we've done our part. We went through 30, 40 years of economic growth, peace in the world. Our earlier generation to ours fought wars. We didn't have to fight wars. We have done well generally, and we're handing over, we think, a relatively peaceful world to the next generation. And so we've done our job, and we think that we can now play golf and be going to social functions and being friendly with other people, but that's not what's happening. Partly it comes from what's going on in your generation. We have children, and many parents are not really talking to the children all that much. There's, of course, generation gap in all generations. They said there was a generation gap. Even in my generation, there was a generation gap. That accounts for part of it, but a lot of it, I think, is also somewhat of a stoicism on our part. We feel that we've taken care of ourselves during our young age, and we have done our part. The next generation, let them deal with it. They'll deal with it, and we don't know what to do, so we say let them deal with it. The other issue I've seen generally in my generation is we don't even have the lexicon to talk about this. Your generation talks about relationships in a way that's different from the way we dealt with generation. Relationships to us means the traditional relationships we have had, family, friends, neighbors, all of us were connected in a very different way in our generation. We had larger families. We had neighbors who we could hear and talk to. I could shout out to my neighbor when I lived in New Jersey. If I had needed something, that you would say, John, what do you want? And that's not the way we live now. And so we have a different kind of loneliness now. And we're also not talking about it to one another because we feel that Either we feel that we don't want to really pry into other people's affairs. There's much more of a value now given to privacy and space and so forth. So we don't really. This is something that I want to talk about some more. We don't generally offer help, and we don't ask for help, and so we just stew in it alone. And so this is compounding all of this, I think. And so we think, can we throw money at it? Can we throw resources at it? We saw that technology is not really solving it. So it's not a question of really how rich a person is or how poor a person is. All through society, I think this is an issue that's looking for attention. We're nowhere near a solution. First, we got to attend to this. And my question is really, in your generation, is this affecting certain types of people, certain demographics, or certain economic groups, people living in big cities? You've traveled extensively all over America. So what do you see among your generation?
I will quote the ever wise 50 Cent, right? He said, depression is a rich people problem, right? And there's a reason he said that. Now, we can't deny what people are feeling, but there's an important point to note, which you brought up, right? You alluded to this. When you think of the Maslow's hierarchy, right? The pyramid of needs, right? At the baseline, there's food, security, survival, right? And then you move up all the way up to self-actualization, right? There's romantic relationships under that, etc. And this is kind of how humans, or this was posited, that this is the chain we go up to live a fulfilling life. So when you think about your generation, right? And this is across demographics, rich and poor alike, the focus, and you see this reflected in even the media and the movies that were made at different times in the 70s and 80s, right? In the Maslow's hierarchy spectrum, they have this quote that good times build weak men, right? Weak men build hard times build strong men, and strong men build good times. Now, obviously, it's not gender specific, but when you think about the struggle that you all had to go through, right? You may be underestimating it now because you've put in the work, etc., right? But regardless of winner or loser, people's focus in your generation, you couldn't focus as much on the quality of relationships. You couldn't ask, was your favorite show The Office or Big Bang Theory? Those questions didn't matter. Functionally, it was, can we be self-sufficient, move away from our parents' generation, create a home, some type of sustainable wealth, and have kids, right? The qualification for a partner, and even for friends, was, like you said, a neighbor saying, hey, right? A wife or a husband who could be supportive at some level. Nowadays, you can be extensively picky. You could want to choose someone who has fuchsia as their favorite color. Where has it left us, right? It's the opportunity cost is decision fatigue, right? We have so many options. So when you think about something like this, because I hear people, and I talk to over 100 women a day on average, and I hear this as a common theme, which is that technology is an issue, right? Social media is the problem. And then you see governments try to curb. I mean, right now they're curbing TikTok for different reasons, but technology is inanimate, right? Technology is not a problem. People talk about Chat GPT being evil. If you use technology the right way, this is how we're able to communicate right now, right? I'm able to talk to women who can more closely align with my values and my ideals than I would be able to choosing someone from my school hallway, right? So when used appropriately, it's a matter of philosophy on how you are going about the problem of loneliness. So when you think about different generations, yes, this problem is more specific to our generation. I don't want to call our generation weak, but at the same time, the standard of living of our generation, most people who are having trouble in life, who are deadbeat, who are behind on credit card payments, they've got a Netflix subscription. They've got a phone, right? They've got the basic food, right? Fast food wasn't as cheap as it was given inflation now relative. I ordered from Popeyes a few nights ago. I think it was $19 for what would have been way less, right? For a family dinner box. So I think loneliness is a first world problem in some sense, right? But it is a problem that for too long, or at least recently, the band-aid of a discussion around mental health, therapy, the meta reality of, well, we're solving it. It's virtue signaling, right? How often, if someone comes crying to you, you'll be there for them, right? People, it's like giving for show, putting up a flag saying you support a certain movement, giving some money to the homeless and thinking you've done your alms, right? So I think the first thing is that to accept the reality, right? True stoicism is that a lot of us as good as our lives may be, are in pain, right? And the first hard part of admitting that, it's not like finance or working out, etc., right? If you work out, you can get muscles. If you work hard at a job, you can make money. How do you solve loneliness? Can you snap your fingers and fall in love? It's not an easy problem to solve. So I would like to, Dad, off that, right? Why do you think that this generation, right, our generation is going through this? You talked about that potential gap between parents and kids, supervisors, mentors, even principals with their students. Do you all understand what our generation is going through, or is it a sense of entitlement that we might have?
Well, I don't think our generation understands what you're going through, because I don't think we understand even what our own peers are going through. We have a general idea a bit of the issue, but not specifically. We have an intellectual idea about this issue, but not an emotional grasp of the issue. And we are aware of it as we are aware of our issues. Each person is aware of his issue, maybe what he is going through, or maybe even his kid is going through, but not what somebody else is going through. And that's because we are also not talking to each other about the problems that we are facing. We are discussing things that are comfortable to us. And not only are we, when we post anything on Facebook, we only post about what vacation spot we went to, and we're not really inquiring about really, how is your son doing, how is your daughter doing, and what are you doing, and so forth. And I think this lost connection is something that goes deeper into our society. Generally has not dealt with personal issues in the same way that we have dealt with other professional issues and so forth. We have today institutes and universities and seminars for everything imaginable: algebra, physics, culinary arts, whatever you want to study, you can learn. Why is there no institutional framework to teach people about relationships, about how to deal with one another, how to date, how to be a good husband, how to be a good father, how to be a good boyfriend, how to be a good girlfriend? There is no institutional framework. I think that we as a society have not come up with any type of understanding that we can codify and then try to begin to deal with it. In the old days, we had some institutions like the church we go to. People go to the church or other high school PTA organizations. We met with other people who are going through similar stages in life. A lot of these things have really fallen by the wayside now. Now we are now left to deal with it just on our own. And so this we have to really ask, why is this not being talked about? Why is this not as big an issue as so many other issues that we dealt with? We dealt with a lot of at one point smoking was a problem, right? And we went after the whole industry. It's causing lung cancer, all kinds of things. We went with, but drinking, we dealt with it in a certain way. We got Mothers Against Drinking, DUI laws, a lot of those things we're trying to grapple with it. Loneliness is a much more difficult issue, I think, and I would like to know why we're not doing something systematic about it.
I don't want to lose that point there, because there is a difference, right, in terms of, and this I'm again not going to blame social media. I don't think we should blame inanimate objects, right? It's how we use it. So what I want to say is that the solutions that come, people talk a lot about this instant gratification, this attention deficit economy that we're in, right? Quick form videos, the TikTok videos that do best are 7 seconds long, right? Casual interactions through dating, etc. Now, when you think about, by definition, the solutions that are created, now you bring up the problem. Why is this not talked about as much as other problems, right? People like to solve problems they have the ability to solve, right? Nobody wants to bring up a problem that they don't know how to advise on. So in advance, when you think of what's baked into why people are awkward and avoidant to talk about these issues, it's because the solutions are tough, and the solutions are tied to the psychological phenomena that's going on, which is how people interact with their media and with other people. So think about the current band-aids for loneliness, right? Let's talk about dating, right? That's my specialty. That's what I focus a lot of my time on. How do dating apps work, right? 1 in 2 relationships in the US start online. And there's still people who say they shouldn't meet online, et cetera, right? This is a difference between generations, right? We're not going to be meeting people at PTA. We're not going to play outside and run into people. And I think that's okay. We should use technology to our advantage. We can have a much deeper love story and deeper friendships and personal connections that probably you all could have had in your generation. But there's an inverted business model that's at play. If you find someone that you get along with, what happens after that? You get off the app, right? If you go to a therapist that helps you feel better and feel heard, what do? You stop going to therapy. If your antidepressant works, what happens? You're supposed to get off of it, right? So hold on. Does the journey end there? How many of you have been in a relationship and as soon as you moved in, it got better immediately? Let's be honest, right? Loneliness is a holistic problem that does not end with a band-aid solution, right? And this is part of how I'm trying to solve the problem with Kismet, right? It's not a problem. It is not a lane change. It is not a battle. This is a war, right? A war of attrition where we are losing first the ability to say, I am lonely. I'm hurting, right? That's the first thing. I know that pain doesn't stop with the pill. Okay, as much as antidepressants, I understand their usage and I understand there's the psychological use, but at the same time, your goal isn't to be on antidepressants your whole life, right? Your goal isn't to have a therapist who's your friend for whole life, right? You want to have real relationships. So why is there no dialogue around how we are going to solve this sustainably? The first way of understanding how your relationship journeys occur beyond just romantic. I'm talking platonic with your parents, with your supervisor. How does that journey evolve over time? How do you do conflict resolution? And behind this, there's a ton of biometrics. I'll give you an example. Men and women, when they fight, couples, when they fight, right? If your heart rate gets above 96 beats per minute, cortisol, the stress hormone, floods your neocortex, your prefrontal lobe. You go into fight or flight response. Your sympathetic nervous system is overwhelmed, right? Couples fight their worst during these times, above 96 beats per minute, okay? And that's typically when women tend to stonewall and shut down. Men tend to get their most aggressive and conflict-oriented. What they found is women on average need 25 minutes away from that situation. Men need 20 minutes away from that situation. Imagine you had an Apple Watch or a Fitbit that gave you a haptic vibration when you're about to explode. Now, someone like me, I'd probably still fight anyway, right? Screw the watch, take it off. But imagine at the end of the month, you could have a reminder that said, hey, you got triggered 13 times. Maybe set some intentional time to talk about this and resolve this, because the successful rate for a happy relationship is 3 times a month. And this is just one data point that I can bring up over 1 million. But what do we have to guide us? Instead, we have shows like Euphoria, where girls are 15 having sex in pools. We have Chicago public schools giving condoms to 10-year-olds, saying if they're going to do it anyway, let's give them prevention. We are enabling the problem, and that is the poison, right? The dialogue around mental health, etc. It's cool to have a mental health issue. What happens when they cry at home after they're blacked out? When your daughter or your son is miserable, and then suicide is just another data point, right? So the problem has to be accepted first as something of, this is a personal experience. This isn't some societal type of thing to state in a report by the CDC and talk about it as an epidemic. So that's one thing. But I would like to know, your generation, with the wisdom you all have been through your own share of tough problems and dealing with the external world in terms of trying to overcome a lot of things that we probably don't have to worry about. How can your generation help our generation, or vice versa? Because senior care home citizens are also doing very poorly when they're isolated. Who goes and visits them? So what do you think can happen on this intergenerational side?
Well, I think our generation has to be involved with the next generation, because not only to help the other generation, we can help ourselves by talking to the next generation. Because what is the purpose of life really? We all the things that we have is really to find happiness in family life, or with friends and neighbors and around us. So we got to really work together. But it's possible, but it's very, very difficult, because I think we carry a lot of baggage on our shoulders. We some of us think that we may have contributed to the issues of the next generation. Sometimes the next generation tells us that we caused it, and there's some truth to all of this. And so we really have to really take this as a mission that we have to work on. No matter, it's not something, it's not an option. This is not something that we can leave to chance, because this is really going to affect everything else that we do. We've got all kinds of issues that are going on around us, And if you're not happy, if you're alone, then I think we'll have a very, very big issue. And one of the things that I'd like to ask you is, you are dealing with this from a business point of view.
Yeah.
How do you deal with personally? What are you doing to deal with your own loneliness?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question that I have to face every day, right? And I think it's unnatural for a human to be living in a box by themselves, right? We were not primed, we were not biologically made to operate like
We
this, right?
came out of the caves because we are social.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So I think we are in an unnatural state, and you could tie this to almost something like a breakup, right? You sometimes see them on social media, they're in your city. Humans were not, Richard Dawkins said this, right? Humans were meant to process medium-sized objects moving at medium speeds, right? Not the quantum or the cosmic. And relationships are a lot like that. The language of the internal. We're dealing with massive amounts of pain of broken relationships, from high intensity of talking every day on a phone, sending pictures, to, oh, I got blocked, right? And we're supposed to just operate like everything's okay. So I think when I think about myself, when I say how do I deal with loneliness, I think a good way to frame this is in the romantic perspective, because I truly, sincerely do believe that family, I mean, procreation is the program that drives all of us, and love is the lubricant. And I will be honest that evolutionarily, humans are more indexed to avoid pain than we are to acquire pleasure. For for every negative statement they've shown in a couple or in a partnership that you say to someone, it takes 5 positive statements to overcome that, right? They can predict with over 90% accuracy whether you're going to divorce in 5 years based on that ratio, right?
Wow.
Of joint statements versus individual critical statements. And I think about people who say, hey, you can get over that job that fired you or something, or you can get over that girl who you broke up with. No, you can't. Not until you find the right connections, right? Because what you're left with is this brain that is not experiencing enough plasticity that you would experience in your generation with new experiences and travel and new jobs. We're now working remotely at home with memories and social media of people with happy lives. How are you supposed to create and build a life from that? So the way I deal with loneliness is I'm running from pain. That is the truth. And I think it's the truth that a lot of us are scared to admit, because we got to be in this self-love generation, right? Everything's okay. Then secretly go kill ourselves, right? No, I will admit that I am deeply in pain. And I think facing that and being honest with that is how I'm able to, I don't drink. I've never done drugs, right? Probably get more women than anyone in New York, right? So, I mean, I'm looking for love very sincerely, and I'm building a company to help others with this problem. So I think the way to deal with loneliness is, the first thing is you admit it's an issue, right? Be able to vocalize the feeling, talk about it intensely. If I ask a lot of people, I ask women, if you had to cry by the end of today, what would you do? A lot of them say, I have no clue. Would it be art? Would it be inspiring? We've lost the ability to feel. We're so numbed by escapism. So the first thing is feel what you're feeling, whether it's meditation, watch a romantic movie, watch a sad movie, go through some albums, feel first. Then utilize technology. Connect with people like myself. Message me on Instagram. I'll talk to you, right? Connect with the people you're surrounding with. Have some criteria around what you want to connect on. But, before I get too carried away with this, I want to tie this to a point with you, Dad. So I'm talking about this from an individual level. I'm trying to solve this on a societal level. But is this mostly an individual struggle, or is this something that, as a society, we can do something about?
I think it's something that we must do something about as a society, because although we are globally connected, and people talk about, in we're all part of the global community, and people criticize tribalism and nationalism, and even family structures are actually breaking down. I think that we have to rebuild this block by block as a society, because we have seen this during the opioid crisis. We have seen this in the last 10 years or so. Gradually, it's like the boiling frog syndrome. You don't really notice how insidious it is until it just blows up. So we've got to do, I think, something serious about it, and it's got to be a concerted effort. My own sense is that we really, first thing is, people should reach out. You pointed out, you feel the pain, you admit the pain, you express your pain, then you got to really reach out for help. We have dealt with other crises like smoking, cigarettes. People smoke less and less now, because we know that it's bad. The government got involved, the society got involved, scientific community got involved, and we passed laws we've also made a lot of progress against drinking and so forth. But this is a much more difficult problem. I think we need to really create institutional framework for coming up with ways for people of different generations, people of different demographics, people of different types of issues that they're grappling with all alone. And we're not all alone. That's really the theme of this podcast. You're not alone.
Yep.
You and I are fortunate. We talk a lot about this, and
Yep.
I would encourage everybody really to talk about this.
Yep.
We'll find a solution.
And I wanted to, that's a great point, especially to the title of this. You're not alone, but I would love to state this just as an ending to this episode, right? Which is that loneliness is more dangerous than obesity, than chronic disease, than smoking. It's the equivalent of 15 cigarettes a day, right? Now, the nuance is this, okay? We've come into this self-deprecating culture where it's almost cool to say we're in pain, but not actually internalize and express that pain. It is okay to accept and know you are in pain, but pain is not good. People say there's beauty in sadness. Without pain, you can't have happiness. That's true, but there's enough pain in life, right? Loneliness sucks. Admit that. You don't want to feel that, right? If you touch fire, your body is made to move away from it. If you're feeling sad, a pill's not going to make you happy, right? Long term, right? Therapy can only help in the near term, but when you get back to your house at the end of the day, it is a problem that you want to solve. So do reach out. Start somewhere. Reach out to me. Get some sunshine. Talk to a stranger, whatever it is. But as they say in Incredibles, if everyone's special, no one is. It's the same thing. If loneliness is good, then love won't matter. Company won't matter. Loneliness is bad. Let's solve it. Let's start relating and connecting with each other. And this is one way we can do it.
Yep. It's a very, very important message. Thank you.
Thanks.